Alice and I are always looking to be more healthy, and we were just talking about how fasting is one of the best ways to do that, but it's so hard. But the great thing about Prolon is that's not what you're doing. It's not that you're not eating for 5 days. Instead, you're using their science-backed program to convince your body you're fasting.
You guys, this 5-day program really is amazing. It comes beautifully packaged and it does all the thinking for you. Each day is its own box. And by following their program, I know I just feel so much better. And I can't wait to experience Prolon Next Gen and continue to see results. For a limited time, you can be first in line to experience the new Next Gen at special savings. Prolon is offering the Prosecutors listeners 15% off site-wide plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day program. Just visit prolonlife.com/prosecutors. That's PROLONLIFE.com/prosecutors to claim your 15% discount and your bonus gift. prolonlife.com/prosecutors.
Hi, everyone. This is Jillian with Court Junkie. Court Junkie is a true crime podcast that covers court cases and criminal trials using audio clips and interviews with people close to the cases. Court Junkie is available on Apple Podcasts and podcastone.com.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on the Prosecutors, it's perhaps the most famous case in American true crime. Who murdered JonBenét Ramsey? Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host par excellence, Alice.
Brett, that was like really good pronunciation.
Oh, yeah.
I don't totally know what it means, but something
I don't either.
To do with excellence?
I think I assume it means really good and not like below excellent or something. You know what I mean? That would be.
Or it's like, what if it was like subpar excellence?
Right. It's like all those words that people say that they don't. We all do this, that we don't know what they mean. Like, that have the opposite meanings of what you think. It's like on The Simpsons where the guy sees the thing that says it's inflammable. Inflammable. It means it's not flammable. Like, no, actually. It doesn't. So, what are you going to do? But anyways, I think this is a good one.
You may have just changed a bunch of lives out there. They're like, what? Inflammable? Oh, no.
I mean, it's really dangerous to have flammable and inflammable mean the same thing. I mean, maybe it's just me, but that does seem like a problem. But
that's a really good point. That's a super good point.
Anyways, see, Alice and I, we're just blabbing here because we are terrified.
We're stalling, shall we say?
Stalling is a good word.
We are stalling because so Brett texted, was like, "Are you ready to record?" And I had just gone for a quick walk around the neighborhood, and on the whole walk back, I was like, I want to walk slower because I can't believe we're actually diving into this. Everyone's going to be unhappy. I don't know what our conclusion is yet, but I know everyone's going to be unhappy because this is one of the most heated cases, and the opinions in this case are just they span the spectrum.
It is rare that you go into a case knowing you're going to make everyone angry that listens to you about it, but I do feel like we're probably there because there's a couple things about this case. Number one, it's huge and there's so much written on it. And This is the longest outline we've ever done by far. It's insane. I don't know how many episodes this is going to take. All I got to say is buckle up. If you hate JonBenét Ramsey, come back in a couple months because this is going to take a while and we're going to take our time. We're not going to rush this. We're going to walk through it. We thought of different ways to do it. Should we assume everybody already knows everything and do it a little differently? And at the end of the day, we said, no, we're not going to do that because number one, not everybody knows everything. I doubt there's anybody listening who's never heard of this case, but maybe they haven't really dove into it. So we're going to do it just like we do every case. We're going to walk through as many of the facts as we can, the timeline. I guarantee you we will not mention something that you think is important. If you are listening to this podcast, we are going to skip something. It is just not possible.
Also because there's so much written on it, some of it is debated as to whether it is in fact evidence.
And by some of it, she means all of it.
Okay, fair. I was trying to be a little hopeful.
I mean, this case has to have as much information out there as we have. The number of concrete facts we actually have approach zero. Everything is debated, and you're going to see that as we go through. And so we're going to try and present to you sort of both sides of things to try and help you understand that. I do want to, before we dive in, I just want to cite some sources because there are so many. We've used a ton. There are going to be a ton listed on the website, and they are all worth checking out. Lots of different news articles, which obviously we'll link to. Some books that we read on this. Listen carefully, The Truth and Evidence in the JonBenét Ramsey case. The excerpt from The Cases That Haunt Us by John Douglas and Mark Olshaker. We Have Your Daughter by Paula Woodward. Perfect Murder, Perfect Town, which is another book on this case. Foreign Faction by James Kohler. Who Killed JonBenét Ramsey by Dr. Cyril Wecht. And JonBenét by Steve Thomas. So we read all those books to some extent. There was one or two that didn't get as far into because they were kind of absurd and dropped those. CandyRose.com has all the documents in this case, so you should check that out. JonBenétRamsey.pbworks.com is another case. We are going to be citing from those a lot. We're not going to tell you every time we cite from all these different things just because we don't want to bore you to death with citations, but we just wanted you to know what all we're looking at. We've read a lot of folks on Reddit. We'll mention some of those who've done a lot of work on this case. At the end of the day, the thing is, this case is now 25 years old. And the amount of work that has been done on this case by web sleuths and journalists and Redditors and podcasters, there's just so much out there. So we're just laying all this out there for you ahead of time. So if you listen to this podcast and you're fascinated by this case, like a lot of people are, you got a ton of rabbit holes you can dive down. And those rabbit holes, we have been working on this outline for quite some time. But having said all that, I don't want to delay any longer. Like I said, we are totally stalling here.
I was going to say we are trying to delay, but I hear you.
We're going to dive into this case, and I want to start this case with a riddle. And the reason I want to start this case with a riddle is because I feel like this riddle exemplifies in some ways the way we're going to look at this case and the way I think you have to look at this case. Alice has heard this riddle before, so Alice, don't give the answer away. I'm going to give you the riddle, and then I'll tell you the answer. I promise you. I will tell you the answer, but I'm going to give you an opportunity to answer the riddle first. So here we go. There's a woman, and her mother dies. She goes to the funeral. She's sitting up front where people tend to sit when a family member dies. The funeral is just about to start when the doors to the church open. And she turns and she looks back, and a man walks into the church. And immediately, despite the circumstances, despite how sad she may feel that her mother is dead, she immediately falls in love with him. It is love at first sight. Not a great meet cute moment, but it is. It's love at first sight. Since the funeral's about to begin, the man sits in the back of the church. So the funeral ends, the woman jumps up, she wants to make her way to the back to say something to this man, but there are all these mourners, and they're stopping her, and they're giving her their condolences and telling her how sad they are, and by the time she gets to the back of the church, the man's gone. And so she turns around and she asks everybody there if they know who that man is. And every single person she asks says, no, don't know who it is, no idea. 2 weeks later, this woman's sister is murdered. The police do an investigation, and they realize that the woman is responsible for her sister's death. They bring her in, and she confesses to everything. So here's the riddle. Why did the woman kill her sister? And we're going to give you a couple seconds. We're just going to sit here for a couple seconds so you can think about this. If you want to think about it, go ahead and pause the podcast because we're about to say the answer. And I want you guys to have plenty of opportunity. So think about it, discuss it with your friends if you're listening to it with other people, and then hit play. Okay, here we go. So spoiler alert, the answer to the riddle is coming.
You're still going to make someone angry that you said the answer to the riddle too quickly.
I know. But anyway, here we go. Here it is. So the woman killed her sister because she figured if the man went to her mother's funeral, he would probably come to her sister's funeral as well. That's why she did it.
Oh.
Now.
That's really good. And also really dark.
Really dark. It's really dark. And if you've seen this riddle before, you know that it's often presented not as a riddle, but as a test for psychopaths. And there's a reason for that. Most of you out there probably did not come up with that answer. You probably came up with something strange, like the man was really her sister. That's one you get a lot. The man was having an affair with her sister, something along those lines. And the reason you're doing that is most people, and the reasons people say this is a psychopath test is because psychopaths think of things as they treat people as a means to an end. So they use people. In whatever actions they take, they use people for their own end. And generally speaking, we think of good people, and the good way to treat people is people are ends unto themselves. You don't use people. You're trying to like make other people happy or build community or whatever. So, and most people would not murder someone solely to help their own ends, right? They wouldn't do that. They wouldn't kill their sister just in the hopes of bringing the guy back to the funeral. A psychopath would do that because he's thinking of the sister as a simple means to an end. But most people need a reason. So what you do when you hear this riddle is you are inventing reasons for why the woman might have killed her sister. So there's nothing in the riddle that would make you think that it's really, her sister is now become a man and this woman didn't realize it. And when she found it out, she murdered her sister because she couldn't live with it, right? There's nothing in the riddle that would make you think that. There's nothing in the riddle that would make you think the sister is having an affair with a man. In other words, there's no evidence. There's no evidence of those theories that most people go to. And I've told a lot of people this riddle, and most people don't get it. But I had one friend who I told the riddle, and they said, the answer to this is so obvious it can't be this. And I was kind of excited by that because I'm like, oh, really? What is it? And they said, well, she killed her sister because she hoped he would come to that funeral as well. And of course, then I called them a psychopath, and I was like, this is hilarious. You're a total psychopath because I'm a bad person. And they said, no, it's just that if you look at what you have, if you look at the evidence that you have in the riddle, that is the only conclusion you can come to. You can only come to another conclusion if you add evidence.
Well, that's a good lawyer, whoever that is.
I know. And this was a lawyer who said this. So why am I bringing all this up? Because we have a case here. We have a riddle. That is what we have. The JonBenét case is a riddle. It might be the greatest riddle in all of true crime. And we have a limited set of facts. And what I'm going to challenge everyone to do is to attempt to judge the case and judge the various theories in the case based on the facts we have and leave speculation aside. And that's really hard. And we're going to talk about where the speculation comes in. But we're going to try and do this just based on the evidence, and then we're going to come to what we come to. Having said that, there's a lot of problems with the evidence in the case. We're going to talk about that. I know that. But to the best of our ability, we're going to try and leave speculation aside.
Brett, I am so excited to tell you that the Prosecutors Podcast is brought to you by Progressive. Progressive helps you get a great rate on car insurance, even if it's not with them. They have this nifty comparison tool that puts rates side by side, so you choose a rate and coverages that work for you. So let's say you're interested in lowering your rate on your car insurance. Visit Progressive.com to get a quote with all the coverages you want. You'll see Progressive's rate, and then their tool will provide options from other companies, all lined up and easy to compare, so that all you have to do is choose the rate and coverages you like. Progressive gives you options so you can make the best choice for you.
You could be looking forward to saving money in the very near future. More money for, say, a pair of noise-canceling headphones, an Instapot, more puzzles, whatever brings you joy. Get a quote today at Progressive.com. It's one small step you can do today that can make a big impact on your budget tomorrow. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/Wondery.
Bombas makes the most comfortable socks, underwear, and T-shirts.
Warning, Bombas are so absurdly comfortable you may throw out all your other clothes.
Sorry, do we legally have to say that?
No, this is just how I talk, and I really love my Bombas.
They do feel that good. And they do good, too. One item purchased equals one item donated.
To feel good and do good, go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY at checkout.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
So, with that, Alice, do you want to talk about some of the more interesting sources? We talked about some of the sources, but there are some sources that people don't really talk about that we wanted to talk about before we dove into this.
Sure. So in addition to the many books that Brett just listed, and I will say this again because this is no surprise to all of our listeners now, Brett is the most prolific reader I've ever met, and probably the most prolific writer, but definitely the most prolific writer ever. So if you can't get through that list of books, you are not the only one. Don't worry, it's only Brett. Now, in addition to the books, documentaries, online resources, and leaks in this case, we know that there is a surprising source of information that we haven't listed yet, and that is federal litigation. That litigation resulted in a summary judgment opinion by Judge Julie Carnes. At the time, Carnes was a federal district court judge. Subsequently, she was elevated to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. And before she became a judge, she served as an assistant United States attorney for several years. So, summary judgment means that there is no trial. There is a judgment on the papers, and I'll go more into what that means, by the judge that grants judgment to one of the litigants. So the way trial works is that there's two parties. Always two parties. That's why there's a V, right? A versus B. And even though in life there's not always one side who wins, in court, someone has to win, so to say. And if it is a civil case, not criminal, if it's a civil case, there is a stage where you can file a motion for summary judgment. And what summary judgment is to say that there are no material facts in dispute. Material is the key word. There can always be facts in dispute, but if they're not material, they don't affect the outcome, then all the questions
left are legal questions. And legal questions are not presented to the jury. Only factual disputes are presented to the jury because our Constitution provides for the fact that any layperson, not lawyers necessarily, not judges, but any layperson can use their own reasoned experience judgment to decide whether traffic light was green or red, for example. That's an issue of fact. But when you are down to no material factual disputes, all you have are legal disputes. And our court of law determines that those disputes are resolved by judges. And so when you file a motion for summary judgment, either side can file it, and you're saying, here's what we know to be undisputed facts, and these are the facts that you need to reach the conclusion. All the other facts, they don't actually matter. So we don't have to go through the trouble of a trial. Judge, you can just resolve the legal issues that may exist here, find these facts to be undisputed, and grant judgment to us. And that's what happened here. And now you may be thinking, who would possibly say, yes, we do not dispute these facts? Because if you're in litigation, clearly you'll fight about everything. But there are facts that cannot be disputed. And where do you get these facts? You get them from depositions in a civil case. A deposition is a sworn testimony wherein an attorney asks the witness questions. The other side can object, and it's kind of like court, but it happens outside of the presence of the court. And because it's sworn testimony, that is someone's sworn testimony.
And this may all seem very strange to those of you who don't work in the law, but there's that old saying that nature abhors a vacuum. Well, the legal system abhors a trial. So trials are expensive and time consuming for everyone. And so the legal system is always trying to get rid of trials. And there are lots of lawyers who go their entire careers and never try any cases because they're doing this kind of legal work. You have in civil cases. Now, we talked about, in criminal cases, very different. You have all these constitutional rights and the way you have a right to a trial and you have a right to a jury and all this other stuff, right? And in the civil case, you have a right sort of to a trial, but there's all of these tools you can use to reach a resolution without a trial. So Alice has talked about depositions. There's also interrogatories, which is where one lawyer just writes a whole bunch of questions and sends it to the other side, and the other side has to answer those questions. There's also something called request for admission, where you say, admit that X is true, trying to get to these undisputed facts. And if you don't answer the request for admission, those can be deemed admitted. Anyway, the whole point of this is when you have a civil case, if you can get to a point where there are no disputed facts, then the judge can decide it based on the law, because juries decide facts. Now, you can have judges decide facts too, if everybody agrees to that. But if you're going to have a jury trial, juries decide facts. Judges decide law. Judges can apply the law to the facts the jury determines, but the jury are the fact finders. And if you have a case where there are no disputed facts, where everybody agrees to what happened, then it can be the judge who decides just based on the law. And you see this actually a lot, that there will be these agreements on what the facts are. Now, Alice also said you're not going to have every fact undisputed, but it has to be material. The reason we go into all this is because you had this case that included facts that everybody agrees on. I'll give you an example before we dive into this. So if you read Scott Thomas's book, Thomas, by the way, is the lead detective from the Boulder Police on the JonBenét Ramsey case. And so Thomas, when it was all over, he writes a book. And the book it's very good. It's a very good read. It's very controversial. It comes to a very definitive conclusion. And in the book, there is some discussion about whether or not Patsy Ramsey was wearing the same clothes on the day after JonBenét, or on the day that JonBenét went missing, as she was the night before. There's this whole discussion about this, because in Thomas's mind, if she is wearing the same clothes, that is an indication that she never went to sleep the night before, indicating to him that she might have been doing something like murdering JonBenét. She spent the whole night doing that. She never bothered to change clothes. And then the police show up, and there's your evidence. That's evidence that she did that, because otherwise you would expect her to change clothes. And so he goes through this whole thing trying to prove that she never changed her clothes. Well, in this litigation, Patsy Ramsey admits she didn't change her clothes, or she admits that she was wearing the same outfit the next day. Now, she says she put it on, but she admits she was wearing the same outfit. So that's an undisputed fact. Whatever else we can say about this case, that is an undisputed fact, and we know it because it's in that opinion, and it's been admitted to by the side that you would think if you was going to dispute it, they would be the ones to dispute it.
That is huge. Notice the nuance in what Brett just said. This is exactly what you do when you respond to questions in a deposition or in a request for admissions, is she admits that she's wearing the same outfit, but doesn't admit that she was wearing it the entire time in between. But also note that you may be saying this means nothing, but this is all we have to go on. I mean, this is pretty much as good as any evidence you're going to get. The fact that Patsy's side is admitting to this undisputed fact. So keep that in mind as we can maybe get vocal on how much weight we should put on this evidence. And really quick note for those of you who are a little confused about if a judge can determine facts, if both parties agree to waive a jury trial, that's called a bench trial. So if any of you who've heard the term bench trial, that's what it means. It's a trial just before a judge, not before a jury.
Right. But you have to choose to do that. So usually you're going to have a jury, but if you decide, you can have a judge decide it. And a lot of times in like a really complicated case, maybe a case with a lot of scientific stuff, people will choose to have a bench trial and they'll go that direction rather than having a jury trial.
I worked on like a 3-month-long bench trial that was a patent litigation case. And there was a good reason they went bench trial, because I think a jury would have hated both sides because it was just scientific gobbledygook for 3 months.
Yeah. And then sometimes you'll see these copyright trials that become, or IP litigation that become bench trials, and the judge will be this 85-year-old guy and he's trying to figure out how, Apple works or whatever. There's some famous examples where maybe that's not the best way to do it, but it's just how the system works. Now, the whole reason we say this is because we have that, we have these facts that nobody disputes. This opinion in this case, it's usually called the Carnes opinion because that's the name of the judge who wrote it. It's very controversial because it comes to the conclusion that the Ramseys didn't have anything to do with JonBenét's death. And so people who feel the other way attempt to undermine it. And if you Google it, you're going to find all sorts of, all the reasons that you can't trust it. And some of those are perfectly legitimate because as Judge Carnes admitted's a strong word, but acknowledged when she was nominated to be a circuit court judge, she was actually asked about this case because this is a important case. And so she's, during her confirmation process, is asked about the JonBenét Ramsey opinion she wrote. And she said, look, it's summary judgment. I'm dealing with the facts as they're given to me. I don't have access to the police file. And, based on what I had, I reached the conclusion I did. And that's 100% true. So there are reasons to maybe not give it. It's not gospel. Just because you read it in the Carnes opinion doesn't mean it's gospel. Like everything else we talk about in this show, we have to compare what we see there against the evidence we're seeing on the ground. And that's what we're going to attempt to do as we go through this. I realize this is like the longest introduction to a case we've ever done, but it's important. It's important that we lay the groundwork for how we're going to look at this. So the whole point of this discussion is that the facts in a summary judgment opinion are undisputed or are viewed in the light most favorable to the plaintiff. In this case, the plaintiff was someone that the Ramseys alleged could have been involved in their daughter's death. And you had all the major players in this case were involved in this litigation at some level or another. Thomas, the Boulder police detective, who's the source of most of the anti-Ramsey information in the case. We talked about the book he wrote. He's in this. He's convinced Patsy's responsible. He's a part of this case. Fleet White, who is the erstwhile friend of the Ramseys, who was with John when he found JonBenét, and who the Ramseys would later suggest was a possible suspect, and who would later suggest that he thought the Ramseys did it. And of course, the Ramseys themselves, they're involved in this litigation. No recitation of the facts in a disputed case will ever be completely correct or completely accepted, but this is a valuable resource. We're going to put it on the website. You can read it for yourself. If you're interested in this case, I highly recommend you at least take a look at this opinion. Now, as we've said before, the biggest problem in this case is that despite the leaks and the books and the special access by some to the police files, for the most part, we don't actually have most of the investigative documents in this case. It's still an ongoing investigation. I mean, this feels like a pretty cold case, but it's still a murder investigation, so they're not just going to turn over everything to anybody who wants to see it. There are a number of books that claim to offer an inside perspective on the case. You have, on the one hand, we have Your Daughter by Paula Woodward. We talked about that. That book is written from the Ramseys' perspective. She was a friend of the Ramseys, but she also had special access to some of these files. Then you have Steve Thomas on the other side, who believes that the Ramseys were responsible for their daughter's death. Obviously, he had all sorts of access because he was the lead detective on the case. You've got John Douglas, who we've talked about before. He's one of the fathers of behavioral profiling, one of the most important FBI agents ever. He wrote a chapter on JBR, and we talked about, or I mentioned that earlier. It's a great book, whether you care to read this chapter or not. He, at one point, was actually brought in by the family, so some people think he's biased. So once again, you got to take everything with a grain of salt. We're going to list all those online resources. I want to give a shout out to MMay333, who is a Redditor who's compiled a ton of information on the case. I found her Reddit entries to be particularly interesting. And, you know, the best way to use Reddit when you're looking at these cases is you read what somebody wrote and then you go and see if you can back that up with the actual evidence from the case. And so it can give you really good jumping off points. So that's a good way to use Reddit. So the long and short of all of this is there are questions in this case that not only don't have answers, they have multiple answers. And those answers are all contradictory. And we're going to get some things wrong, and our advice to you is to do your own research. We're going to give you as many resources as you want. So, like so many cases, trust no one completely, not even us. Trust only yourself. If you really care about this case, dive into this case. But with all that said, the longest introduction to any case we've ever done, let's talk about JonBenét Ramsey.
And on next week's episode, I'm just kidding. All right, let's talk about the story. If you are listening to this podcast, you know who JonBenét Patricia Ramsey is. The daughter of John and Patsy Ramsey and sister to 9-year-old Burke. She and her well-to-do family lived in Boulder, Colorado, and they lived a life that from the outside might have appeared to be perfect. But perfect life or not, it all came crashing down on Christmas Day, 1996, when a little girl was murdered and an enduring mystery born. We'll do an in-depth timeline like we always do, but to set the scene, here's an overview of what happened that day. Everything about the case is controversial and in dispute, so take all of this with a grain of salt. We'll dig into the disputed parts of the timeline later. But Brett, why don't you set the scene for us?
Sure. You know, JonBenét Ramsey, JonBenét Patricia Ramsey. She's named for both her father and her mother. I listened to the True Crime Garage. They did a 6-parter on this, which is a lot for them. They never do more than 2, maybe 4 episodes on a case, but they did 6 on this. And I think Nick said she might have been the only person in America who had that name, JonBenét. It's a very unique name, and probably a name you never would have heard had it not been for this. As Alice said, this all begins on Christmas Day, 1996. So the Ramseys put JonBenét to bed around 9 p.m. The next morning, the family had plans to leave Boulder, Colorado, and travel to a family gathering. At around 5 a.m., Patsy Ramsey woke to find a 3-page ransom note on the stairs. The note claimed that someone had kidnapped JonBenét. According to the ransom note, her parents would need to pay $118,000 for her safe return. The note stated that the kidnappers were going to call between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m., quote-unquote, tomorrow, with instructions for how to drop off the money. Between when the note was found and that afternoon, police officers, friends, and family members searched the house. None of them found JonBenét, but they did manage to wander all over the home, ruining any evidence that might have been found there. Which, you know, we're going to talk about this a lot, but every disputed case you talk about, at some point, someone is going to claim that the police ruined the scene, that there were too many people on the scene, there were too many people wandering through the scene, They, destroyed a lot of evidence or brought in a lot of new evidence. Whether it's the Michael Peterson case or the Darlie Routier case or the Dr. McDonald case. I mean, whatever case it is, somebody's always going to make that claim. In this case, it is 100% true. We're going to talk about that more once we dive into the facts of it, but there is no doubt that the police, from the very beginning, messed this up by not, once they had a kidnapping, deciding that the entire home was a crime scene. Essentially, the only thing they treated as a crime scene was her bedroom, which was absurd. But they are tramping around this house looking for her body. At 1 p.m., one of the officers on the scene suggests that John, who is JonBenét's father, should search the house again to keep himself busy. This time, he goes into the basement and enters the wine cellar to find JonBenét's body. She has duct tape over her mouth and a cord wrapped tightly around her throat by way of a garrote made from a broken paintbrush. There was a paint set just outside the room where JBR was found. It belonged to Patsy, and the paintbrush appeared to come from it.
I know we're not going to get on too many tangents yet, but the first thing that struck me so far of setting the scene, Brett, is that this is a kidnapping of a young girl, but they are searching the home, not the neighborhood, necessarily for, and you said body, because there's no indication that it's been a murder yet. Do you know if that's common for such a young girl that so much attention be searching the home where she should have been taken from?
Well, and as we're going to talk about this, there's a couple problems already creeping in here. Boulder is, there's crime in Boulder. Boulder has a university campus. The University of Colorado is in Boulder, but it is not the kind of place that sees a lot of serious crimes. Not that many murders, not that many kidnappings. And kidnapping's incredibly rare as it is, but certainly not a kidnapping like this. Now, if you have a missing person, if you have a missing child, one of the first things the police are going to do is they are going to search the house and they're going to search the environs, because the assumption is a child goes missing. There's at least a decent chance that the child left on their own, that maybe they wandered off or they ran away or they're hiding. And so that's something to do. The weird thing about this case is you have a ransom note. It is very clear here that there is a crime. A crime has been committed. And that's the thing that blows my mind about this case. A crime has been committed. There's no question. It's at least a kidnapping. It may end up being a murder, because most kidnapping, not most, but a lot of kidnappings end in murder, especially by strangers. And to have the police doing this haphazard search, not even by the police, but by other people, is the first big, huge problem in this case. So, no, in a situation like this is very unusual.
Sorry, I thought I would just give people a teaser of what's to come. Now, JonBenét Ramsey's cause of death is controversial. The autopsy concluded that her cause of death was asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma. Either cause would have killed her. The fracture is massive. From the autopsy report, it says, quote, "At the superior extension of this area of hemorrhage is a linear to comminuted skull fracture, which extends from the right occipital to posterioparietal area forward to the right frontal area across the parietal portion of the skull. In the area of this fracture is a roughly rectangular shaped displaced fragment of skull measuring 1 3/4 by 1/2 inch. The hemorrhage and the fracture extend posteriorly just past the midline of the occipital area of the skull. This fracture measures approximately 8.5 inches in length." Basically, to sum that up, in case you didn't understand all the words in there as I didn't, the trauma was the equivalent of falling from a 3-story building and landing on your head. Massive.
And, we will post photographs or links to photographs from this autopsy report to the website. They're generally available online, so it's not like it's anything you can't find. Obviously, they're tough to look at. I mean, they're difficult to look at.
I would say use your judgment.
Because, use your judgment. I mean, these are pictures. The pictures of the ligature are particularly difficult to look at because it's JonBenét with a cord wrapped around her neck. The picture of her skull, I'll leave it to you whether or not, that depends on you personally and what you can handle. It's from the autopsy, so it's actually the skull has been removed because that's what they do, and it's a picture of it. And you look at this picture and you can see just how horrible this fracture was. I mean, I don't know what you thought JonBenét's injury was when you thought about this case or read about this case, but when you look at this photograph, you know that this injury definitely would have killed her. There's no question it would have killed her. 100% it would have killed her. And there is this massive hole in her skull where whatever struck her just punched out this massive area. And then there is a crack in her skull that runs essentially the length of it. And those of you who know, your skull is really strong. It is hard to crack your skull like this. You can do a lot of damage to your head. You can get hit pretty hard and not have damage like this. So this was whatever happened and whoever did this was a vicious attack. So that is the general story of this case. That is summed up as best we can, the general story of the murder. There's a lot more to tell, and we're going to tell that through the timeline. But if you've never heard of this case, if somehow you're living under a rock, or if you've heard of it but you've never looked into it, that is essentially what happened. Obviously, depending on who's involved, some of that story may not be true. But that is the public story as told by the Ramseys at the beginning of this case. Now we're going to look at the timeline. Alice, before we continue, I want to talk about one of our favorite sponsors, PDS Debt. How many of you wish there was a better solution to paying off your debt? Our sponsor, PDS Debt, has customized 0% interest options for anyone struggling with credit cards, personal loans, medical bills, collections, or any other type of debt. Because of the tough year from COVID-19, certain types of debt can now be reduced and in some cases completely eliminated from your credit. There are more options now than ever before to take control of your debt, and the experts at PDS Debt can help. PDS Debt is giving our listeners a free debt analysis and copy of their credit report just for completing the 30-second online debt assessment at pdsdebt.com/prosecute. You will receive a full breakdown of all the interest you shouldn't be paying each month and multiple options on how they can help get rid of it.
I mean, Brett, this is such a great deal because if you're making payments every month on your debt and your balances aren't going down, then this program is for you. The average American with credit card or personal loan debt over $5,000 ends up paying back 2.5 times what they originally spent. Now, PDS Debt rolls all of your payments into one low 0% interest monthly payment. Everyone with over $5,000 in debt qualifies, and there's no minimum credit score required. Bad and fair credit are accepted. Save thousands in interest and fees and pay off your debt in a fraction of the time. So, PDS Debt is offering free credit reports to our listeners just for completing the quick and easy debt assessment at www.pdsdebt.com/prosecute. That's pdsdebt.com/prosecute. Take back your financial freedom today by visiting pdsdebt.com/prosecute.
This timeline comes from a lot of different sources, but a great source and one I recommend is this website, JonBenétRamsey.pbworks.com, and there's another website called A Candy Rose. We're going to link to both of these. These websites look like they were designed, they probably were designed in like 1997 and never updated. So they're very strange and they're very difficult at times to navigate. But if you can figure out how to navigate them, pretty much everything that is public in this case is on these websites. And there is some public information. Like I said, there's plenty of the case files that most people have never seen, but there is public information out there, and you can find most of it here. And they put together a really good timeline. So we're going to use the timeline. We've edited some, we've taken out some stuff we don't think is important, but don't call us and tell us we've been plagiarizing because we're going to read you from this timeline. For our purposes, we're going to start December 20th through the 24th, 1996. You can go back further than that if you want to, but we're going to start here. So on December 20th, Access Graphics, which is the company that John Ramsey is the head of, it has recently been purchased by a large defense firm. It is the company that is enabling John to live a very wealthy lifestyle. On this day, they have a luncheon party to celebrate their $1 billion in sales that they have hit. That is obviously a momentous accomplishment to sell $1 billion worth of anything. I don't care what it is. This is a company that has 300 employees. They're hosting this luncheon party to celebrate this at a fancy hotel in Boulder, and this is reported on in the Daily Camera. We bring this up obviously because there is a ransom note in this case, and if that ransom note is legitimate, you might think, and John Ramsey has said that this might have been the moment where this crime started. If you think there was an intruder involved, it could have been that that person learned about this, learned about John Ramsey, and decided he was a target for blackmail or for a ransom demand in this case. So JonBenét Ramsey is what's the word to use? JonBenét Ramsey is a child beauty queen. It's something that everybody knows about her. It's one of the reasons this case has been so fascinating. If you've ever looked at this case, you're going to see pictures of JonBenét all dressed up for her pageants. We do not plan to use any of those pictures because I think it obscures the fact that JonBenét is a child. I mean, she is a child, and when you look at the pictures of her not dressed up for her pageants, it is just so obvious. She is a child. She's a 6-year-old girl. And I don't want to judge whatever Patsy and the fact that her child was involved in these pageants. It is very controversial. And if you see any of the pictures, you know why. There is a lot of what seems like sexualization of a 6-year-old going on in these pageants. If you ask the Ramseys, they will tell you that JonBenét loved doing this, that it made her feel close to her mom, a former Miss West Virginia. In fact, Patsy's entire family had been involved in pageants. They were a pageant family. Her sister had been involved in them. Her mother had been involved in them. Patsy had been in the Miss America pageant. It was something they were passionate about, and it was something that she wanted her daughter to be involved in. And according to them, her daughter really enjoyed it, and she may have. I'm not one to say whether she did or not, but she's taking part in these pageants at the time. Why is this important? We're going to talk about some of the pageants she was in. Once again, either this was a intruder who took JonBenét for a ransom, in which case that party that Access Graphics had might have been really important. It's also possible this was a pedophile who targeted JonBenét Ramsey because they were attracted to her, in which case the fact of these pageants might be important. And these are all paths people have gone on. Every person who was involved in the pageants that JonBenét was a part of has been looked into as part of this case at some point or another. So that's why this is important. On the 20th, JonBenét appears in the Rock Around the Clock performance at High Peaks Elementary School, where she puts on her talent routine that she does for her pageants. That year, I believe she had been named Little Miss Christmas or Little Miss Colorado Christmas. She was involved in a ton of these, and she was always winning them. She was really good. Her mom obviously knew what she was doing. They were willing to spend money on the best dresses and the best makeup and the best hair, like all that stuff, right? So she was winning these things left and right. Her whole house is covered up with trophies that JonBenét has won. On 12/21, following up on that Access Graphics party, the Daily Camera writes a business article, or an article in its business section, on the fact that Access Graphics has reached $1 billion in sales and celebrating John for all he has accomplished. On the 22nd, the next day, JonBenét is appearing once again in a beauty pageant, this time at the Southwest Plaza Mall in Boulder. And obviously, any number of people could have attended that event. By the 23rd, Christmas Eve, the Ramsey Christmas party happens. The Ramseys host this Christmas party. They have approximately 30 guests attending, and they have former journalism professor Bill McReynolds playing Santa Claus. Why is this important? Because once again, if this is an intruder, this was an opportunity for at least 30 people to learn more about the layout of the Ramseys' house, which will become important later. Bill McReynolds, who played Santa Claus, will also become important later. That night at 6:47 p.m., something happens that either is incredibly significant or not significant at all. I don't think there's any in between on this. And that is a 911 call that is placed by someone at the party. It is answered by police dispatcher Teresa Hillary. The caller hung up without saying anything. The police were dispatched to the home because that's what happens when you have a 911 hang up. The police actually attempted to call back, but all they got was the answering machine. So they go out to the home and essentially are told there's no emergency, could have been anything, but it's not a problem. And they leave without really doing any more investigation than that. I say this could be important because it just could be important. It also could just be a kid dialing 911. Which I think is probably the most likely explanation for what is happening here. Given what is going to happen in a couple days, a lot of people have really looked into this as one of those coincidences that seems like don't actually happen in real life, but in fact happen all the time.
Right. I mean, and especially thinking, I mean, it could have been knocked over. Someone could have, a kid probably did it, but it could have been an accidental dial from an adult, anyone at the party. Hang it up. It's loud. They call back, answering machine. But let's keep going. On December 24th, now it's Christmas Eve. An article appeared in the Boulder Daily Camera regarding that Ramsey Christmas party. I think this is very interesting because it's being written about because it's the Ramseys, not because of the size of the party. I mean, 30 people attending is not a small party, but it's certainly not, the blowout of the century.
And I think this sort of gives you an idea of who the Ramseys are in Boulder. I mean, I've had some parties at my house, but nobody ever wrote a newspaper article about it,
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, the fact that John Ramsey is appearing in the local paper twice in a span of a couple days says something about their status, that people care about reading their articles. People care about knowing about them. They are someone that are known to people outside of their immediate circles, people who want to know who they are, who are not their immediate friends. On that same day, JonBenét played at her friend Megan Kostanik's house and told Megan's mother about a secret visit from Santa. You could chalk this up to just child, innocence, excited about it's Christmas Eve, that Santa did come, in fact, the day before to the Christmas party, or just some fanciful story that she's making up because it is a magical time of year. But she does tell Megan's mother about a secret visit from Santa.
And this is another one of those things you just want to put a pin in because we're going to come back to it. This is kind of like the 911 call. There's not really much more to say on the 911 call, but there's more to say on this. Is this a really significant thing that's happening in this case, or is it just a throwaway thing? And this one more than the 911 call. I mean, the 911 call is just kind of weird and interesting, and it makes you wonder and it makes you think, but there's really not much more to say on it. This thing that JonBenét said the day before she was killed is something that people have really pored over and thought about. We're going to talk about it more later, but for now, we'll continue with the timeline.
So, same day, Christmas Eve, the Ramseys attend twilight service at St. John's Episcopal Church in Boulder, as many families probably do on Christmas Eve. Now, later that night, John retrieved JonBenét Ramsey's bike. This was around 9 p.m. He gets her brand new silver girl's bike stored in their neighbor's house, Joe Barnhill's garage. and places it under the Christmas tree for JonBenét. And again, this is something I see lots of parents do, especially with a big gift like a bike. It's not easily hideable in your own house because I don't know about you, Brett, but I definitely hunted all over my house for Christmas presents as a kid. And so John had gotten this bike for JonBenét and just hid it next door. And it was 9:00 that night that he went to go get it so that he could put it under the Christmas tree for Christmas morning. And in preparing for Christmas morning, the Ramseys get all of the stashed gifts that are wrapped and ready for prime time from the basement area to bring up to the Christmas tree that night.
Which is all, like Alice said, very normal stuff. This is what you would expect from a family getting ready to celebrate Christmas. What's interesting about the gifts from the basement area, we're going to spend a lot of time in this basement and talking about the basement, the layout of this basement. One place that the Ramseys would keep presents was this quote-unquote wine cellar where JonBenét's body is eventually going to be found. In fact, presents were found in this area after JonBenét was found. It's a little unclear exactly what those presents were for. Some of them were open. It's weird. But in any event, this is a place they kept the presents because it was not a place that JonBenét and her brother Burke would go. They did not tend to go back into this wine cellar area because it was dark and it was dirty and it was kind of moldy. And it just wasn't the kind of place kids were going to go, so it was a good place to put the presents. Like Alice said, we all did this, right? We all searched our houses for presents before Christmas, especially, but maybe even before birthdays or whatever, looking to see what was there. And I'm sure these kids did the same thing. And every parent has a place they can put stuff where they know their kids are not going to go. And this area was one of them. And that may or may not be significant as we continue on to talk about this case. So we have barely even scratched the surface of this case, and we're already like an hour into it. So once again, this is going to be you got to bear with us, guys, on this one. I mean, there's going to be people who are listening to this show for the first time, and they're never going to listen to us again because they're like, oh my goodness, these guys are taking forever. But we're going to take forever on this case because it deserves forever. And we're going to do as many episodes as we need to do, and we're going to go through this thing, and we're going to talk about all this evidence, and that's what we're doing. And I promise you that next week when we talk about this, there'll be a lot less introduction and a lot more diving into the facts. But where we are now is we're getting ready for Christmas Day, December 25th, where a lot of things are going to happen, including this crime. We are just at the beginning of this, like I said. There's so much to talk about, and I'm very excited to talk about it with you guys. But we're going to leave you now. This is all we're doing for today. We're going to be back next week to talk about it some more, but even as you just begin to look at this case, you can already feel why it's so interesting. There's already these little things that are popping up, and there's going to be so many of those little things as we go on. And we're going to talk about the ransom note in this case. We're going to spend a lot of time on it and going through it, what we think about it, what we think it says. We're going to talk a lot about this timeline, a lot about the eyewitness accounts, and really the things that were written in those first few days. There's so much that's disputed, and there's so much that's common knowledge in this case that really isn't that accurate. And we really want to dig down to try and figure out what people were seeing and saying when JonBenét's body was found. And hopefully that can help us reach some sort of truth in this case. I don't know, Alice, what do you think? I'm excited about doing this, but it is scary. It's a scary case.
It's scary because of all the things we already spent the first half of this episode talking about. So, you know what? Now that we started, let's do it. Like, I'm committed. We're here until whenever we finish this outline.
There you go. Let's do a 10-hour episode right now.
I may not be in for that.
For those of you, so we give you plenty of books to read if you want to read in between now and our next episode. There are some documentaries to watch on this. There's a ton of documentaries to watch on this. One that is really good and really different is called Casting JonBenét. I believe it was on Netflix. It might be. Where did you watch it, Alice? Did you see it on Netflix?
I think
or somewhere
Netflix,
else?
yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's on Netflix. Excellent. It comes at the case from a completely different perspective and shows you all the sort of different, it's not a real in-depth discussion, but it shows you all the sort of different possibilities for what happened. So it's a great overview of the case if you don't really know a whole lot about it. And it's, even if you do know a lot, it's such a different perspective on the case that it's worth watching. Another thing you can watch is the CBS documentary on this case, which resulted in a massive lawsuit. We will be posting, we've actually already posted this to our website because it was interesting for other reasons, but the CBS documentary reached the conclusion that Burke Ramsey was responsible for this case, resulting in a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit against CBS that CBS eventually settled for a lot of money, probably. The documentary, I mean, I don't want to tip my hand because we're one episode into it. Whatever you think about the theory, the documentary itself is not very good, but it's almost worth watching just to see how bad a documentary can be. It's really bad. I mean, it's like the Scott Peterson documentary that we talked about a lot in Who Killed Lacey Peterson or whatever it's called, that we talked about a lot when we did the Scott Peterson documentary. It had flaws. It had a lot of flaws. The CBS documentary on JonBenét Ramsey, you could do an entire episode on the flaws in that. We're going to talk about a lot of them as we go through this, but it is something to watch if you just can't get enough JonBenét Ramsey. I think that's enough for today. We've blabbed long enough. Next week, we're really going to dive into this. We're really going to start hitting the high points on this and working through this case. But until then, if you want to talk to us, if you have your theories, if you have thoughts, if you have questions or comments, shoot us an email at prosecutorspod@gmail.com. Hit us up on social media at prosecutorspod. Check us out on YouTube. Find us on Reddit. If you don't like all the ads that were in this episode, join us on Patreon for ad-free episodes. I can't wait to hear what you guys think about this case. I know all y'all, we've gotten more requests. This is the most requested case that we've had. Everybody wants to hear about this case. So I hope that even though we're barely scratching the surface, that we're living up to what you want to hear. And I promise you, by the time we are finished, there won't be a whole lot we haven't discussed. So that's my guarantee for you as we continue on through this case. Well, Alice, do you have anything else you want to add before we sign off for today?
No, but please come back. I promise there's going to be so much discussion.
I can't believe we're an hour into this already.
I know.
This is all we've talked about, but it's okay. It's okay. This case deserved a lot of introduction, and it got it. But all right, guys, well, we'll be back next week with new information on this case. Can't wait to discuss it with you. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Go jump in. Save me from myself. Sorry. I'm just like going in circles in my brain.
Right.
It's like fun. I just hosted a 2-year-old birthday party yesterday. I'm very tired.
That's it. 100%. No, I'm with you 100%.
At the superior extension of this area of hemorrhage is a linear to comminuted.
Yeah, that one I don't know.
So I'll start that over. Which extends from the right occipital to. You're still listening, right?
I'm glad you had to read this.
Okay, I'm gonna keep going. In the posterior, I can't do this.
How about you just say in the area of the fracture?